Okay, we're taking a look at the game 1812, the campaign of Napoleon in Russia, and it was designed by Phil Urbanes and John Young in 1972, published by SPI. Now, for those of you who saw my other video, you may remember that the game came out in two forms, an area movement game and this hexagon version of the game. I kind of favored the area movement game, but I'm slowly being won over to this one. And in fact, it is my favorite game on Napoleon's campaign in Russia. Other titles have come out, more recent ones, fancier graphics, but I keep coming back to this old classic. So in this video, we're going to look at the pieces of the board, the combat results table, and I'm going to go through a few moves of the game, and we'll see how it goes. Now, the graphics for the time were minimalistic by today's standards, but they were perfectly serviceable. The units were corps and division when they were broken down. So here we have a Russian cavalry corps, 3-6, and a Russian infantry corps, 5-5. Up here we've got some part of the Grand Army, Murat, Grushi, and some cavalry. The leaders were rated for offense and defense, and there was quite a few of those. Now, when units were reduced, 5-5s were reduced to 2-3s, and 3-6 corps were reduced to 1-4s when they took losses. So the counters were, like I said, minimalistic, but perfectly functioning. And the game begins in June of 1812, where we can see the Grand Army, located mainly here in Poland, and they move first. Actually, the Russians move first. They will be advancing on Vilna here. The Russian army is rather scattered, while the Grand Army is rather concentrated. And there are French units stretching all the way back into the German states too. And there we have Schwarzenberg. We've got the famous Pripyat marches, which are off limits. We'll go out a little bit, and you can see most of Russia is shown. Moscow is way here over at the edge of the board, quite a long way away. So it covers the same ground as the area version. We also have St. Petersburg located way up there. So it's a very simple map, but perfectly functional. There's your time record chart. The green indicates units, the Russians coming in, and the blue for French. And your terrain effects chart. Now we're going to go through a few of the moves. I don't think we're going to shoot the whole video will not be the entire game. Just wanted to give you an idea of how this game plays. And we'll shoot each phase, do a few turns, and show you what this game is all about. Now, just like the area version of the game, the Russian attrition table is kind of brutal, as is the French attrition table. And the game begins with the Russians rolling on that table. Let's roll, see what they get. Russians get a 2, which means there's no effect. So they escaped the first effect. Now the next phase is the Russian movement phase. And if you're not familiar with the campaign, the Russian army starts off in not a good position. The Grand Army is huge compared to the Russian army, and the Russian army is scattered all over the place. So they virtually have to retreat. They have to give ground. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions about this campaign, that the Russian retreat was preconceived and it was all part of a plan to draw the French in and destroy crops and stuff as they advanced. That's the way it turned out, but it was not planned that way. The Russians retreated because they had to. If they'd stuck around in Vilna here, they would have been destroyed. So we're going to begin the game by having the Russians fall back as fast as they can, and we'll catch the video from there. Okay, this is the situation after the Russians have fallen back. They used their normal movement. They did not force march, but they used their supply unit to scorch the Drissa area, flatten it, burn up all the supplies. Of course, they're doing this in anticipation of the French eventually marching in there and having a hard time. And that's all they will do for turn 1. And I've sent this corps further north to concentrate with Barclay. So we've just seen the Russians fall back. Nothing really spectacular happening there. Okay, the next phase is the French moving phase. Now, historically, Napoleon had intended for his brother Jerome to march south here rapidly, southeast, and cut off Bagration, but he was slow in doing so, and Bagration was not surrounded. Napoleon wants to have a battle here in the western part of Russia if he can, but in game terms here, he can't move any faster than the Russians. So his infantry, the Grand Army, could be about here near Vilna. He'd have to force march to catch Barclay, and force marching can be pretty iffy in this game. So I'm going to play a conservative French advance, and we'll move the French units forward and take a video. Okay, doing the French attrition roll, they got a 6, which is unfortunate for them. They have to lose a cavalry and an infantry corps. And I decided to take it off of the infantry and cavalry corps that come on turn 1 here at the edge of the board. So they're gone. The French also made a conservative advance. And now we come to the rather important supply phase. Here we determine how many corps are in each area and its effect on the food supply in the area. I'll do that, check for each area, and we'll see how the areas are depleted. Okay, we've done the area depletion, and in the area where the Grand Army is located, it went to 50%. There's a lot of corps in there, so a lot of the food was absorbed. The other areas weren't too bad, but the French decided to scorch this area and make a mobile depot. They'll need to carry food into Russia. So that's the situation at the end of turn 1. There was no combat, and the Grand Army continues to advance against the Russians. Okay, I forgot to check the victory points. On turn 1, or at the end of turn 1, the French are supposed to have 7 victory points, and they do so. Most of the ones they have were in their own territory, and they've got this one up here, here at West Kovno, Memel. So they don't lose anything because they have met their minimum objective of 7 victory points. Next turn, turn 2, they'll have to have 8. So they'll have to capture some fortress in their turn. So we'll go on now to turn 2. Now just before turn 2, the French created a depot there, and Vilna is 50% depleted. So that's the situation before the French move for turn 2. But of course, the Russians begin the turn, so let's roll for attrition and see what they do. Okay, this is the Russian turn after turn 2. They've retreated once again, and they have gathered here in the Polotsk region because Drissa is completely flattened. They've moved their supply unit to Polotsk. Now the French will have to capture a fortress this turn. They should have no problem. They'll be able to get this one at Lutsk. But the Russians are going to contest this one at Dunaburg. And I don't know if the Grouchy there wants to attack that one or not. Let's see what the French options are. By the way, the Russians didn't lose anything in their attrition roll. We'll do the French attrition roll, and then they move. Okay, in the French attrition roll, they lost a cavalry corps, which it took from the rear elements. The Grand Army continues to march forward. Grouchy goes up to the fortress here, but does not attack it. When you're in a zone of control of the enemy unit, you do not have to attack. The French easily take 2 fortresses here, so they're well ahead of their victory schedule. So no problems with the French on turn 2. We'll now do the supply interface and then go on to turn 3. Okay, as I suspected, the area with the Grand Army has got flattened, 100% depleted. The rest of the areas are okay. I could mention here that there's a subtle difference between the hex grid and the area version, in that in the area version you had combat when you were both in the same area. Here, opponents can be in the same area and have no combat. Thus, the attrition can be higher in this game than in the area game, because you have to account for twice the amount of cores, the French corps and the French corps, Russian corps and the French corps. So you can get depletion more in this game than in the area game. So that's the end of turn 2, and the Russians fall back and the French continue their advance. Okay, in their attrition phase, the Russians lost an infantry corps, which they took off at Mogilev. They continued to retreat, and they've concentrated here at Polotsk. They tried 2 forced marches, one cavalry one failed and didn't make it, the other infantry corps did make it. So Barclay is sort of concentrated here at Polotsk in order to bring battle. Well, he's offering battle to the Grand Army if Napoleon wants to attack from there. Let's see what the French can do. Okay, for the French attrition roll, they lost another cavalry corps, and they created a depot here by scorching Prussia. Schwarzenberg marched here into Volhynia. They have to have 9 fortresses captured this turn, and they're got past that, so they're okay. We've got the Grand Army concentrated there. They force marched 1 corps and lost it, and now they're going to do battle with Barclay's army at Polotsk. And we'll look up the combat. It's across a river, and we'll have our first big battle of the campaign. Now, I'm not so sure if this was the right decision to attack at Polotsk, but Napoleon will have 4 infantry corps and 4 cavalry corps versus Barclay's 3 infantry corps and 2 cavalry, plus, of course, the leadership for the leaders. Now, he is attacking across the river, so the Russians will be doubled. So it's going to be an iffy attack, but I'll work out the odds and we'll see what Mr. Napoleon does. Okay, checking the rules. Attacks of less than 160% are not even allowed, so Napoleon is not allowed to attack Polotsk from the other side. So I'll put the pieces back where they were, and we'll end the turn and do the supply attrition phase. Well, as I suspected, the Vitebsk area is flattened because we have one heck of a lot of corps in there, Napoleon's and the Russians, and Minsk went to 50%. So that's turn 3. We get into late July. The French army is still advancing, but Russia is getting rather depleted. Okay, the French lost another infantry corps this turn due to attrition. Schwarzenberg is still advancing here, although now we have Russian forces under Smorov. And Napoleon decided to not take the bait and give battle near Orsha. Although he could have had maybe a half-decent attack, he decided to play it safe and capture these fortresses along the way and consolidate the Grand Army. So now he's got quite a lot of forces nearby, and Barclay is concentrated fairly well too. So let's see what happens next on turn 5. Okay, we've got a dicey situation coming up now because Bagration fell back to Vitebsk, which is in a 100% depleted area. But he's got a supply unit here at Smolensk, and the rules say that he can be supplied from there. That means the French are going to have to go into a depleted area or move into Orsha and fight him from that point of view. But the French are getting very low on supplies now because the whole area is depleted. So it's going to be interesting to see whether the supplies can come up in time or whether Napoleon is just going to have to wait until they do so. Okay, this is after the French moved. Napoleon did a couple of forced marching. Some corps got in, one was destroyed, some did not. He's got a huge force here, and he's going to be attacking Bagration, or rather Barclay. Let's work out the odds and see what this battle is going to be like. Okay, it's a big battle. Napoleon's throwing 6 infantry corps and 6 cavalry corps against 6 infantry corps of Bagration, or Barclay rather, and 5 cavalry corps, although one of them is disrupted. We'll do the odds, add up the leaders, and see what kind of battle we have. Okay, after adding all the modifiers, it's 140 to 159% battle. We'll roll the die and see what happens. Okay, Napoleon clearly won that one. He got a defender retreat scattered. So the Russians will have to retreat their full movement allowance, and then we'll see about the cavalry pursuit table. Okay, I don't see any pursuit table here, so I must be getting confused with the area version of the game. So Napoleon's army does take Vitebsk, and the Russian army has retreated, so it's clearly a French victory there. Okay, I just realized I did something wrong in that last battle. When Napoleon took on Barclay there, I was supposed to add in all of the leaders in the attack and defense. That might have made a difference, but for the sake of the video, we'll say that Napoleon won the battle anyway, and the Russians retreated. So what we're going to be doing now is turn 6, the Russian turn, and we'll take it from there. Okay, the Russians do a very basic move. They just fall back to the very edge here of the Smolensk area, and they keep their forces in the south ready to take on any French at Kiev. So there's very few Russian units on the board. Just there in the south, main army at Smolensk, and a smaller army up here at Riga. But the French army is concentrated very much so in the Grand Army, following into central Russia. So we'll see what the French do, and we'll take it from there. Okay, the Grande Armée lost another infantry corps, which they decided to take off their reinforcements way off here in the west. Napoleon himself, with the Grand Army, occupied Smolensk, and these other corps are coming up. We'll now do the supply phase, and I'm pretty sure Smolensk is just going to be flattened 100%. The French are not having any difficulty at all maintaining their victory point lead. They have to have 13 this turn, and they know they have at least that. So let's do the supply phase and see what the effect is. Okay, as I suspected, Smolensk just went 100% depleted. Russian army's here, Napoleon's there, and Moscow's there. So the French are well ahead of their victory conditions. The Russians will have to start to do something now. Now, turn 7, the next turn we're going to do, a whole bunch of reinforcements for the Russians arrive from the north edge of the board, and these guys arrive from the south edge of the board. So something could start to happen now. Let's see how it goes. Okay, the Russians decided to do a bold move here. They countermarched rather, and is going to hit Van Damme's corps. Van Damme's corps will not be able to retreat before combat because the Russians will have over 500% against them. Now, it's a good move because even though they are in a 100% depleted area, they have their supply unit here in Bazloy, which will be able to sustain this army. Napoleon, on the other hand, can't really counterattack because he can't stay in the Smolensk area because there's no food left. He'll have to work something out with his supply units. Actually, he might be able to anyway, we'll get to that in a moment. For the short term, Barclay has a 500% attack on Van Damme. Let's see what that does. Well, that battle being over 500% results in the complete elimination of Van Damme's corps. So Barclay gets away with it. Now the French will have to roll for their attrition and see if they can counterattack. Their attrition roll is 3, which means they have to lose a cavalry corps. So we'll remove one of those from the board and see what happens. Well, okay, Napoleon counterattacks Barclay. I've forgotten how unwieldy some of these stacks can be in this game. One of the disadvantages. Napoleon's going to be okay because he's got a supply unit here in Orsha. So he won't have to worry about the attrition. Now we're going to work out the odds for this gigantic battle here outside Smolensk. It'll be a big one. Okay, that big battle works out to a 200 through 299%. So Napoleon could actually win the campaign here by destroying the whole Russian army. Let's find out what it is. He rolls the dice, and he gets a 6. That destroys the whole Russian army. Well, at about this point, I think I probably want to call it, because with the Russian army totally destroyed here at Smolensk, there's no way they're going to be able to recover. That's what's coming in, and they'll be able to get Moscow. I think I would call this a French victory. But I'll go into overtime a little bit, go a turn or two more and just see what could happen. But I don't think the Russians can recover from this at all. They've lost their whole army. Now I just went into one more turn, and there's no way the Russians are going to be able to survive from this. The Grand Army is huge. It can now spread out. It can take Moscow, get ahead in points. It could even take St. Petersburg by the end of the game, I think. And so I'll call it. Anyway, that's 1812, the hexagon grid version of the game. I hope I made it interesting. Probably not. It's very hard to make a replay interesting, but tried my best. Anyway, this game probably is not very representative of the way 1812 usually goes. Usually I see the French get defeated, but I played a conservative Russian defense, took a chance by taking on Napoleon with a whole army, lost it, and as a result, lost the campaign. So that's 1812, the campaign of Napoleon in Russia by SPI, designed in 1972. Thank you for watching.